All right, everybody, welcome back. Today is October 27th. It is a Friday, TGIF. Today's discussion is going to finish up our new information for World War I. Meaning after this video is over, if you were in class today, it means that we have discussed all new material of World War I and nothing new is going to be given that's going to be eligible for the test. Now, there'll be some information you get on Monday, but there's nothing that you have to know for a multiple choice question. If you want to use it for your essays as evidence, you can, but everything that's going to be that was in the curriculum that needs to be covered for World War I is going to be covered at the end of this class, of this video. So just make sure you understand that this is the expectation that after you're done, you should be able to complete your study guides for the test on Wednesday, November 1st. All right. So the bell ringer we asked today is when there is a quarrel between two people and peace is finally attained, what are the best ideas you can offer to ensure they never fight again? People in class gave up their offers. We had some discussion about it. But for your bell ringer, if you want to get this down, and don't forget, if you missed today's class, please, on Monday, get your bell ringer to me first right off, because I can enter that grade in and be good for that, all right? So please make sure you take care of this bell ringer and get the answer and turn it to me as soon as you get to class on Monday. We moved on with the discussion. We looked at some of the results of the Treaty of Versailles. Now, with the Treaty of Versailles and the provisions, we talked about yesterday the goals of each of the leaders. We talked about, Woodrow Wilson. We talked about David Lloyd George, and we talked about Georges Clemenceau of France. What they all wanted within their videos and within their goals. Now we watched a video on that yesterday, which is on Canvas on the World War I homepage. So if you get that out and you bring that forward, you can use that to watch what the goals were. Today, however, when the treaty is finally signed, here are the provisions of what has happened. I have a video on that too, and I'll show you where that video is located after I'm done with this. I'm going to go through this quickly here for you. First off, the Germans had to accept war guilt and financial responsibility for the war. That was $33 billion of financial responsibility for this war in that era's money. $33 billion at that time. Roughly, you look at the inflation and how much the money would be worth today, you're talking about trillions of dollars here of how much the money would be worth today, because $400 back then was worth $8,300 today. So you're looking at $33 billion, and what it will be today. Germany will never forget. Hence why you see the cartoon up here of the Versailles Treaty with Hitler coming out of it, because Germans, the amount of pride that they lose here because of this treaty, that they will never forget this really hurts their abilities to really rebuild Germany after the war to their own specifications. They have to build it in the eyes of Britain and France, which they don't like, which is the reason why Hitler gets so much attention when he comes forward with his ideas. All right. Now, the German army is also reduced to 100,000 men, so they can't really have a force that's going to sustain any major attacks. Most of it's going to be as a military force to help police their own people, more or less, than go to war against others. Finally, they had to get rid of their air force and their submarines. Now, it's important to mention, like you saw in the video, if you watched the video yesterday, that the Germans were not invited to this negotiation process. So all of these terms were decided upon and the Germans had no say in whether they agreed or disagreed. They could state their displeasure, but no one was going to listen to them. So when you have the Germans accepting these terms, they are not in the negotiation process. And usually when you have a treaty, especially when we look at the bell ringer we had here in front of us, usually both sides you have to come to an agreement. And that's what people brought forward. If you have the best ideas of what you can offer to ensure that these people never fight again, both sides are going to have to make an agreement. Here, only one side is making the agreement, and the other side is being forced to follow along with it. All right, so this is why this treaty is really, really harsh for the Germans after World War I. But many people say that this is what they deserve. Now, Woodrow Wilson was not about punishing Germany. What Woodrow Wilson wanted was his provision for the League of Nations, which is what he gets. Also, what happens with the world after World War I is that we see the world completely changing in terms of at least Europe completely changing in terms of geography. This Alsace-Lorraine territory, Germany used to kind of cover this straight down here, but this little part that sticks out belongs to France now. The part of Poland takes part of Germany's territory, because Germany had this whole section all the way up to East Prussia. Poland gets some of this land here, and they take it for themselves, so they have access to a body of water. This can help them kind of traverse through Denmark and Sweden and get out to the Atlantic Ocean and maybe help their trade. So big for Poland there. Austria-Hungary is broken up. The empire is broken up. We have three separate countries out of this, Czechoslovakia, Austria-Hungary. And then the people in the southwestern part of Austria-Hungary were now a part of Yugoslavia, with the Slavic parts of the world, or Slavic parts of Europe here. They all kind of join together into one nation. Just Yugoslavia does not exist today, so it doesn't lasted very, very long, but it's different than the Empire of Austria-Hungary. These people now living in this section of the world are now going to be related and going to be living with people that kind of have very similar cultural ties. All right? And that's also the part of Yugoslavia there. So I have these parts of Europe that are really changed and new because of the end of the war, but this is the map of Europe after World War I. This is not what it looks like today. You can probably bring up another map and see the difference in countries, kind of put them side by side, and then you can see the difference even after World War I, and even after the fellow wars, future wars after that. You can see what Europe looks like and compare. Now, Woodrow Wilson gets this provision for the League of Nations, passing this treaty because he has to give up a lot of other stuff that he wanted within his 14 points. He returns home with the treaty, and it meets vicious opposition by American senators, particularly one, Henry Cabot Lodge. He is a Republican. He is a chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which means anytime the president makes a deal with foreign relations with another country, the Senate has to agree to it, because the president can't just be the only person that's responsible for American foreign policy. The president can make treaties and make deals, but the Senate has to agree to it before it becomes something that we accept as a nation. So this is the process that Wilson's trying to get done. He made a treaty, he made an agreement with the Treaty of Versailles, and now he's bringing the treaty home, excuse me, to have the American people agree to it, represented by the Senate. Now, the opposition is led by, like I said, Henry Cabot Lodge, and he wants to make sure that the Monroe Doctrine, all the way back in the early 19th century, that the Monroe Doctrine is going to be the most focused part of this agreement that will be kept in force. What they're saying is, with the agreement that we made with the League of Nations, we're possibly allowing European nations to have influence in the Western Hemisphere, which is what the Monroe Doctrine forbid. James Monroe penned out his statement saying that the European nations cannot come to the Western Hemisphere and colonize. Just like the French did in Louisiana Territory, just like the Spanish did in Mexico, just like the British did for the 13 colonies. These European nations can no longer have a say on how the Western Hemisphere makes itself out, or at least how it unfolds. Europe should worry about themselves, we will worry about ourselves. That's what Monroe says. Henry Cabot Lodge uses this doctrine for the basis as to why he does not like the treaty, because this agreement we are signing, this League of Nations that we are joining, will possibly allow some European nations to come over to the Western Hemisphere and maybe set up new colonies. That's what he's really afraid of. What he's also really afraid of is that we don't want to be dragged into another war. So with this possibility of creating this massively huge alliance, Henry Cabot Lodge does not want to get dragged into a war. So the Senate is looking like they're not going to pass this. Here's the implications. Wilson goes out on a Hail Mary tour of speaking. And when we went into this, he's trying to gather public support. The reason for this is because Wilson knows that the people elect everybody. They elect him, they elect the senators, they elect the congressmen and women that are in Congress at this point. So the important part about this is that if Wilson can change the people's minds, he will have them write to their senators to have them agree to this treaty. And if he can get that, they will pass according to his terms and not the Senate's terms. So, however, while he's out on this trip, he has massive health issues. He comes back home to Washington, D.C., where he suffers a huge stroke. Stroke impairs his body, impairs his ability to think clearly. I mean, he can still think about the issues, but to be able to communicate or maybe take in the information is very difficult for him to do. So he is very inflexible when he's isolated in the White House because of this stroke. His wife is very protective, won't allow senators to come in and talk to him, won't allow him to leave. So the amount of compromise that could have happened as a result of Wilson's health, if he was healthy, he would have been able to compromise, and maybe we have a deal with the treaty in the Senate. But because he's not able to leave and compromise, this becomes a major problem for the Senate, and thus, as a result, the Treaty of Paris and the League of Nations ultimately fails. Now, what's important to mention here is that the League of Nations is Woodrow Wilson's baby. That's his goal. That's the one thing he pushed on these European leaders, and he forced it. Many of their demises, a lot of them did not want the League of Nations over in Europe, but he kept pushing it, and being the savior of the war, they agreed, and they actually agreed to put it in the treaty. Irony is, the United States is now no longer a member of the League of Nations. The League of Nations continues to operate, but it's without the United States and its founder, and Woodrow Wilson, in terms of who is going to be involved. So essentially what this does is this allows Europe to pretty much create their own League of Nations, the League of Countries, to pretty much settle the scores amongst themselves. Now, I always told the classes that there's a definition of insanity we have to look at here. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice, expecting two different results. That's what the League of Nations becomes. Europe couldn't handle negotiating peace amongst themselves before the war. That's why World War I breaks out. And now, with the League of Nations, it's almost exactly the same thing, and we expect the Europeans to do their part. So that's the American take on this. So the treaty fails in the United States. It's not a part of our law. We do not join the League of Nations, and we really leave Europe to their own demise when it comes to the amount of power that is given to that organization to set itself up for failure. Thus, as a result, you have a guy like Adolf Hitler coming to power. All right? That's all we have for today. Actually, for the notes, if I go to Canvas page, you can see what some of the stuff is here on Canvas. The two videos that I had the day before looking at the goal of the Big Three and then the provisions of the treaty are here. And then if you also want to watch at the end of class today, we also looked at a review video of Woodrow Wilson's presidency. This is from the Presidents series on the History Channel. We watched several of these videos before about Teddy Roosevelt and Taft. So this one's about Woodrow Wilson. Watch this and kind of collect some of this information as a review so you can use that to help you out. Again, test, study guide. Our test is due, or it's going to be given on November 1st, which is a Wednesday. And also, I want you to point out that we have a discussion post here that is up on Canvas. If you go to Canvas, hit discussions. The discussion is the effects of war and immigration. You click on that, and you can reply to leave your answer to this prompt. All right? Don't forget to do that. This is due November 2nd. All right? So I'll make sure that that is open for you to keep providing responses for it. Just do not forget to make that response. All right? Everybody have a fantastic day. Have a great weekend.